90th percentile on GMAT Sentence Correction. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your co-host today. Your main host today would be Payal Tandon, who is the other co-founder of e-GMAT. The goal of this webinar is to give each one of you a blueprint to achieve 90th percentile ability in GMAT Sentence Correction, and I hope that is the reason that you guys are here on this in this webinar. Now, and how we're going to do this is we're going to do this by telling you about the e-GMAT meaning-based approach. It's an approach that we pioneered about a decade ago, and Payal Tandon, who's my co-founder and who's your main host, is the inventor of the original meaning-based approach. Since then, we've had 3 generations of that approach, and we're going to talk about that latest generation in this session. So first things first, I want to get you guys to know, want to get to know you guys a bit better, and to do that, I want to figure out what your target GMAT score is. So, so my first question here is, what is your target GMAT score? If you could put that response in here, it'd be wonderful. As we can really see, majority of the group is aiming for a score of 710 or higher. That's about 80 plus% of folks here in this webinar, but 16% of you are aiming for that score of 660 to 700, and we have a considerable number of folks who are aiming for that score of 770 or higher as well. That's about 18% of you. All right, and then I have another poll question, which is, when do you have when do you plan to take the test? And you can see we have a fairly uniformly distributed audience here. 2 big groups, 45 days is about 27%, and those who haven't taken date about 20%. But then other than that, 3 more or less evenly split segments over here. We also have a fantastic free trial. We'll talk a bit about it during the webinar, but this just gives a listing of a few of the video lessons. We give about 1% of our course in the free trials. It allows you to sample what we have to offer. So if you haven't checked it out, do check it out. And we have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free webinar on GMAT algebra. In this, we talk about inequalities and absolute value. If that's an area where you're not at that ability level that you want to be, definitely attend this webinar. That's tomorrow, exactly 24 hours from now. And then next week, we have a webinar in which we'll talk about how do you get to that 760 score? How do you build that study plan to improve to that 730, 740, 760 score or so? And that webinar is next week. Let me get my pen through. That webinar is next week, and you can click on this register now button to register for it. And for tomorrow's webinar, you can click on this particular register now button. Before I get into the crux of this webinar, let me ask one other question, which is, how many of you are e-GMAT students? So if you're a paid student, select yes, otherwise select no. Let's get a few more responses. I have about 60 odd students here in the webinar right now. All right, 3, 2, and 1. About 40% of your e-GMAT students, 60% are people who are trying e-GMAT out. All right, let's go into the presentation pane. So as we go into the presentation pane, the screen should have changed for you. And if the screen has changed, where you look at where you can see the slide that says, to help you to improve to 90th percentile, you may select yes. Otherwise, wait, because depending on the time zone that you are in, it may take a few more seconds for the system to settle down for you. All right, that's excellent. It seems everyone can hear me. The session is, we're recording the session, and we will provide the recording to you in about 12 hours or so. It takes us that much time to process the recording for this particular for a session or so. So again, as I said earlier, my goal is to give each one of you a blueprint to achieve that 90th percentile ability. And just to, in e-GMAT, we try and keep things very simple. So what does it take for you to achieve that 90th percentile ability? There are 2 simple things. If you do those, you get to that 90th percentile ability. I want to just lay the foundation for that, and then I'm going to transition to my co-host Pile. So the first thing you've got to do to achieve that 90th percentile ability is that you have to answer questions with high accuracy, and more specifically, answer difficult questions with high accuracy. And the second thing that you want to make sure that you get there is you want to do that in the time that's in the designated time or so. And if you're able to do these two things, you can get to that 90th percentile ability in SC. And if you're able to do this in CR and RC, and if you're able to do this in Quant, you're able to get to that 90th percentile in those areas, and then you can achieve that 760 score. And yes, lots and lots of non-natives achieve that 760 score by doing just that. If you want to see evidence, take a look at our YouTube channel. You'll see at least 50 journeys of students who achieved 760 score or so. Now, I want to just talk about this piece over here with regards to answer questions quickly. And I want to just separate this out with regards to what people kind of consider this to be when they read answer questions quickly. It's not about rushing through questions. We want to make sure that you're calm while answering questions. But at the same time, we want to adopt methods that help you answer these questions quickly. With that, let's just demonstrate how we achieve high accuracy and speed simultaneously. So what strategies do you need to adopt? What skills do you need to build to get um, uh, to get to that 90th percentile ability? And how do you do this simultaneously? And to do that, I'm going to invite my co-host Payal Tandon to demonstrate e-GMAT's meaning-based approach and the skills that you need to master to uh, 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 to excel in that approach. So Payal, over to you.
Thank you, Rajat. Let's make sure everyone can still hear me clearly. Can you please press yes if my voice is loud and clear? I've already done the voice check, so yeah, good, very good. Thank you, Rajat, for that wonderful introduction and setting the stage for this session. That here we're going to demonstrate the method that you can use to answer difficult questions with high accuracy quickly, and that's the key to what we're going to be talking about in this session. So, certain ground rules to get the stage rolling. We ask, I mean, so Rajat and I conduct really interactive sessions. So the more you participate, you have taken the time out to understand how is it that you can ace SC. So the more you participate, the more you learn. So let me walk you through the various ways in which you can participate in the session. I ask you lots and lots of questions. There are multiple choice questions. There are short answer polls. You see multiple choice question up on the screen. Yes, no poll. You see short answer poll. So whenever I ask you questions and I expect a response from you, post your responses in those polls. You also see a Q&A pod towards the bottom left-hand side of your screen. These utilize the Q&A pod for questions that originate from you. And these questions could be any strategy-related questions, study plan-related questions, or any doubts that are not pertinent to the discussion that is going on in the session. I would want you to focus completely on the topic that we are discussing. But let's say there's a question that pops up in your head. Feel free to post that question in the Q&A pod. I have Mansi, Shrushti, and Harsha supporting us. So if you have any strategy related question or SM related question, post those in the Q&A pod. Mansi and Harsha are our strategy experts. Harsha and Shrushti are our strategy and SM experts. All right. So with that, now we talked about solving questions quickly. However, when I ask you to solve the questions in this session, I am not going to put an unrealistic time expectation. So when I give you the question, I won't say, okay, solve this question in 1.5 minutes. No, I don't want you to rush through it, because right now what we are figuring out is how is it that you should be solving questions. So in this session, you will stay calm, you will solve questions in an untimed manner. But for the interest of the entire group, I have about 80 participants in this class. So what we'll do is when about 70% of the class puts in the answers, I will give you additional 15 to 30 seconds for the others to post their responses. So I'll give you a 15 to 30-second warning, right? So with that, let's get going. But before I give you the question, I actually have a question for you, and that pertains to let's SC skills. What is it that you think is the most important skill to get to that 90th percentile in SC? What do you think you have to master or you have to gain in order to get to that 90th percentile in SC? This poll is to get you going to start interacting with me in this session. So let's continue here. Few more seconds. Let's get some more responses. All right, I'm going to broadcast the results now. So, about 50% of the class thinks comprehension is the most important skill. Good. That percentage is going more towards little less than 50%. Remaining 50% thinks it's grammar and pattern recognition. So, I'm going to ask you this question again after I do my first question, and then I want to see what is it that you think is the most important skill. So I won't give you the answer right now. So we'll post this question again later. So thank you for participating here. All right. So let's get into the first question. So as I said, I will give you the question and let me show you what the question poll looks like. You see this choice here that says still solving. So I want you all to click on that choice because that tells me how many people are actively engaged in solving the question so that I'm not waiting on people who are not really actively engaged. So, how about 84 people? So, let's get at least 50 people to click on still solving. My target is always, all of you should be actively engaged, but reality could be different. So, okay, so cool. I have about 50 here. Sounds good. So, here you go. Question number one. There you go. Good luck. Ten-second. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so whenever I ask you to solve a question, I also ask you to tell me what is your confidence level in when you clicked on the choice that you think is the correct choice. So tell me what is your confidence level here. And that's very important because the more adept you are as your ability to solve SC questions improves, you will see that your confidence level in selecting that correct answer improves, and that confidence level is very very important when you are taking a grueling exam like the GMAT. So let's see, I'm going to broadcast the results here. Oh, they're already broadcasted. Yeah. So I see that 25% of you are extremely confident. About 50% of you are somewhat confident. Okay, so I want people, my target is always to be extremely confident, right? And that happens if your ability is there where it needs to be. Okay, so that should be a very good litmus test in addition to your accuracy and the time to answer questions. So let's look at this question. First of all, my question to you is there a comparison in this question? And let me get my short answer poll here. So wait one second. And one request: any question that you have not related to what the topic of the discussion is, please post those questions in the Q&A pod. Okay. Yeah. So now tell me, is there a comparison in this sentence? Yes, there is a comparison. And how do we know there's a comparison? Because of the presence of the words less than, right? So we know there is a comparison. Now, when there is a comparison, it's absolute. So now, is the comparison parallel? Do you see that both the elements of the comparison have a by after them? No. You have less by, but then than is not followed by. So that's a very, very evident grammatical error. Now, for those of you who selected choices A and B, so 14 of you, you guys failed to observe that grammatical error. And again, this is a very, I mean, this is something which is absolutely stated to you in the sentence, less than. I mean, you don't have to draw any inference, you don't have to get into the nitty gritty details of the meaning here. It's just stated right there, less than. But you fail to observe that. Okay, so that's very important to notice. I mean, things which are absolutely visible, you need to take into account those and make a decision appropriately, right? So choices A and B are gone. Now I'm going to ask you about how many of you actually did back and forth amongst choices C, D, and E. So tell me that. How many of you were scratching your head? Is it C? Is it B, D? What is it? E sounds very precise by the end of a number of you, right? Why was that the case? Tell me that. CNE, absolutely, by the end of. And let me be, yeah, CNE. So, and I'm not sharing the results with you right now for the reasons that I want you to take this quiz, answer this question again. So I want to I want you guys to take a second stab at it. Okay. So you guys did a lot of back and forth. How much time did you think you spent in doing that back and forth? I gave you about 1 minute and 50 seconds to solve this question. Out of that, how much time did you guys think you took to do that back and forth? 10 to 15 seconds, 30 seconds. Yeah, quite a substantial amount of time, right? And that led to you being not extremely confident of your answer. People who did this back and forth, were you guys extremely confident when you selected your answer? Yes, no? People who did back and forth, absolutely not. So look at the cycle that's happening. You're confused because of the quote unquote tricky choices, and there is a reason why I'm saying quote unquote tricky choices, because these are seemingly tricky choices. You are doing back and forth, you are losing precious time, and you are not confident of the answer that you are selecting. Okay, so hold that thought. I want you to hold that thought. Now let's look into how is it that the underlying portion is the coming to an end of, right? And in this sentence, we are just going to take that part here. You've already read the entire sentence, right? The overall reduction of growth and productivity is influenced by two things, and then the author is presenting comparison. It's influenced less by government regulation than by the coming to an end of a period of a certain growth in agricultural productivity, right? So we're going to focus our attention on what does this coming to an end mean, okay? So for this, what I'm going to do is I want you to visualize the meaning of this expression, the coming to an end, right? So for this, we're going to take a very simple example. Change the context completely, right? It's context which is not related to the question at hand, so that you can understand what does by the coming to the end mean. Woolly mammoth rain ended by the coming to the end of the fifth ice age. And then visualize this sentence in your head. Think about, what is the time period being talked about? If the author is saying that coming to the end of the fifth ice age, this means clearly there is a beginning of the end of the fifth ice age. It's not that the ice age ends in an instant, right? It starts to end, and that is the point B over here in your timeline, beginning of the end of the fifth ice age. And then after a certain time period, the ice age ends. Now visualize these woolly mammoths. I mean, these woolly mammoths are wandering around, in huge masses before the beginning of the end. And then at that point, when the beginning of the end started, beginning of the end of the ice age, the fifth ice age started, their reign ended. Okay, so now at point B, you don't see any woolly mammoth. That is what, by the coming to the end of the fifth ice age, is visualized as. How many of you got that sense when you read the sentence on your own? By the coming to the end, this is what it means. You can see more than 50% of the class did not get that, and I didn't really need to even ask that question, because that's evident in the answer choice that you've selected. That's evident in the back and forth that you were doing. Okay, now what I want you to do is, I want you to tell me, beginning of, by the coming to the end, what does that mean? That means that, does it mean that the period has started to end, or does it mean that the action of ending the period, or does it mean end of the period? It means that the period has started to end, right? Now, with this understanding, I want you to take another attempt at this question. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to get that poll again for you, and then we are going to see. One second here. All right. I'm not giving still solving to you. You guys already know choices A and B are out. Okay. So now tell me, what is the correct answer here? All right. I'm going to end the poll. And now I'm going to broadcast the results. 91% of you, 39 of you have selected choice C without even blinking an eyelid. The moment I brought the poll out, you guys selected choice C. You didn't have to even think about it. Compare that to all the back and forth that we talked about, right? And let me broadcast this. Compare that to the only 21 of you had selected choice C. Look at the comparison between choices C and E. More people selected choice C, what I would say, so choices C and E were the most popular choices, right? But why is it that now you were clear that choice C is the absolute correct answer choice? Tell me that now. What changed? We understood the meaning better. Yes. And how did you understand the meaning better? You had clarity. Absolutely. This was the impact of visualizing what does coming to an end of a period mean, right? That's the power of visualization. Now tell me, if you were to answer, if you have this level of clarity of meaning, if you get in the habit of visualizing what is the sentence actually trying to communicate, instead of reading the words. I mean, as you read a sentence, you need to create that mental image of the sentence in your head, right? As soon as you do that, answer choices, those, this is the reason why I said seemingly tricky answer choices, these are not at all tricky. Now you take a look at choice E, and let's now visualize what does choices B, D, and E imply, right? But as soon as you understood coming to an end, what does that mean? You knew choice C is an uncontested correct answer choice. There is no doubt about it, right? That's the power of visualization. Now, what this level of visualization helps you is the key thing that will take you to that high ability, to that 90th percentile ability in SC, because that's the key to answer difficult questions with high accuracy and quickly. Think about, you guys spent anywhere from 15 seconds to 230 seconds doing that back and forth. All of those 30 seconds are slashed right out, right? And here you were able to solve a 700 plus level question within less than 1.5 minutes, just by concentrating on what does the author want to tell me, visualizing his words into an image in your head. Now, one another thing that's very important is, when you visualize what's happening in the original sentence, you are able to reject the incorrect answer choices. But you need to, when you're doing a review of your question, people who score 90th percentile in SC, they focus on what exactly was wrong with choices D and E. Were it grammatical errors? Were it meaning errors? What was exactly wrong with choices D and E? So that they build their arsenal for the next difficult questions that would be thrown at them. So for that, it's important to take, during the review of the solution, after you're done solving the question in your practice session, in your learning session, when you're reviewing the remaining answer choices, you have to spend the time in understanding why each answer choice is wrong. Now, choices A and B we eliminated because of the grammatical error. Look at you guys were confused amongst choices C, D, and E. Let's look at what's happening with choice D. Choice D is saying, so again, try to take the same example. Woolly mammoth reign ended by ending the fifth ice age. What does that mean? It's as if someone or something ended the fifth ice age, right? And then that led to the ending of the woolly mammoth reign. Is that what the author is saying? No, right? So clearly, choice D is wrong. Now you have a crystal clear understanding of what's happening in choice D. Choice D. Same thing, choice E. Woolly mammoth reign ended by the end of the fifth ice age. Now, this is where, now l- compare the two visuals that you have. In According to what the author meant, he meant that B is the point where there were no woolly mammoth. Now, choice E is saying it's C, that point, right? So there's a world of difference over here, right? So this is the level of clarity that a student who's aiming to get that 90th percentile needs to have. Okay. So again, what choice C is saying is the start of the end. D is saying action of ending. E is saying the end. Very, very clear difference in meaning, no grammar error whatsoever. Okay, and all by visualization is something that the key to getting there is this act of visualization. When you say comprehension, about 48% of the class said that comprehension is the key to acing GMAT SC. I want you guys to say comprehension through visualization is the key to acing GMAT SC, because till the time you are just at the surface of the sentence, you won't get the meaning. You have to go beyond that surface. Your goal has to be to create that mental image, create that image of the sentence in your head, so that you understand what exactly the author is saying. And as you do that, you will understand right away. I mean, you're going to see the impact of that right away. You're not spending that much time, worrying about what is the construction here, what is the construction there, is there a grammar error, is this better, is that better. There is none of that. Uh, you know, um, Non-useful discussion that would happen in your head. You would know the correct answer choice is going to jump out at you. All right. Now, with this, I am now, how is it that you actually learn visualization? That is something which is the very fabric of the e-GMAT course. I mean, you're going to see visualization from the simplest of the sentence, the way you see over here. This is one of the sentences from verb ing files, which is in your free trial. So definitely take a look at it, and you see simple sentence: arranging rare exotic flowers in a symmetric pattern, Mary made a beautiful bouquet. Very simple sentence, right? We didn't really have to show you graphics here, but from the get go, understanding simple sentences to the most difficult sentence, the one that we talked about in this question number one, we show you these visuals so that you get in the habit of reading and creating that mental image in your head, right? So that is the key to understanding visualization. Okay. All right. So I'm going to invite Rajat back into the session so that he can summarize the takeaways, and then we'll be ready with question number two. Rajat, over to you.
All right, thank you, Payal. So let's just go back to this, and I want to just repeat this one piece again and again, because I said we want to keep things very simple here. And what does it take to get to the 90th percentile ability? It is two things. One is you've got to answer questions, and difficult questions with high accuracy. This question was a 700 level question, which the accuracy, initial accuracy, and in fact the accuracy of, when you look at the general population of test takers, that's about 35%. What you noticed was there were no difficult grammatical terms here, and 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 uh, and the sentence by itself wasn't complex. And overall, as long as you have that visualization muscle, you could, and as long as you visualize A, the original sentence, and B, the confusing answer choices, you could reject them with a lot of confidence. And when you did that, you also were able to get to the correct answer very quickly. And would you guys agree with this? Okay. Um, would you guys agree with this? Yes, no? Just some typing yes would help. Okay. So as long as you visualize meaning, what you can do is you can reject answer choices confidently, which means when you're confident and you're confident for the right reasons, you achieve extremely high accuracy. And when you do that, you reduce that back and forth. And that's something which is very important here. Why? Uh, because essentially it's the back and forth that causes mental friction. It's the back and forth that consumes time. It's the back and forth that reduces our confidence, and we've got to be able to do that. To actually reduce that back and forth, and that's the way you would do it is by spending more time on the original question prompt, by building that visualization muscle, and by practicing visualization throughout the question, not just in 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 in, in the original answer choice. Now, someone asked this question: how can I avoid becoming a grammatical disaster? In this question, did you see a ton of grammar being tested? Barring the by piece, no, there wasn't a whole lot of grammar. What was tested was your ability to really see how to express a sentence in the most effective manner. And the effective part is where the visualization comes in. And that's the truth with most questions in GMAT SC. GMAT SC is not a test of grammar. If it were, grammarians would ace the test. Most grammarians fail on the test. GMAT SC is a test of your ability to express meaning clearly. And that's where the logic and the visualization capabilities come in. Okay. Here's an example of a student who basically was stuck. Someone asked a question, can I go from a V38 to V45? There's a guy who got to a V47. And what he said is that, hey, if you don't have your meaning correct, and when he says meaning correct, what he's talking about is visualization, then it's like hammering your head against a wall. Now, many of you, when you were looking at choices C between looking to choose between choices C and E, were you hammering your head against the wall? Was this the feeling that you guys had? It's like, I can't figure out which one is correct. And he said something like this may work for that 600 level question, where you instinctively know the right answer, but it will not work for those 700 level questions. And this is something where grammar can be dangerous. Now, meaning works on every level of question. However, grammar works well just on the 600 level question. And people who just focus on just grammar, start getting those 600 level questions right. It gives them that positive reinforcement, and they don't build their visualization muscle. The thing that I want to make sure is that you build that visualization muscle, because if you do that, then you'd be able to get to those 700 level questions right, and that only then you'd be able to get to that 90th percentile, which for most of you is essential if you want to get to that 720, 730 score. Now, if you're an e-GMATer, you've seen this in action. And the reason why I say that is because we emphasize on this again and again, and which is why For those of you who don't know, we delivered 3 out of 5 700 plus scores reported on GMAT Club, and this is since the beginning of 2021. So if you go to GMAT Club's review section, those reviews are organized chronologically. You can really see the number of reviews in a certain period that e-GMATers have reported versus the number of reviews that students from other prep companies have reported. And the reason why that happens is um, because essentially we help people build their visualization muscle. And just to really tell you what that 3 out of 5 means, it means that we deliver 60%, just to translate that, so that you can visualize it, and all of these other companies combined deliver 40% of those 700 plus scores. Again, you can go to the review section, look at this. Now, you got an introduction to what visualization means. You got an introduction to what e-GMAT's meaning-based approach means, and this was invented by Payal, who's your host right now. And now we're going to really just say what sub skills do you need to develop to get to that to build that visualization muscle. So Payal, over to you. And I do understand you have a doubt from question number 1 that you want to address. So let's start with that, and then let's get into the next question and focus on the next set of skills that these guys need to develop to get to that 90th percentile.
Yes, thank you, Rajat. Yes. So I was so as Rajat was collating the takeaways from question number one, I was going through the Q&A pod, and very interesting question came up. So I want to take that question. Um, so I'm going to remove this here, and sorry, just rearranging some polls here. Okay. Okay, here. So this is a question that's there. But since the parts in comparison should be parallel, are we okay with ing word in one part and absent in the other? So look at this. So essentially, what the student is asking is that you have government regulation, but in the correct answer choice, we are saying that the coming. So this is ing, but there is no ing over here in the other part, right? So this is the question that the student is asking. Essentially, so there are two reasons why the student is asking this question. One reason is that they are not focusing on the meaning of the sentence, right? And they're giving grammar more importance. Second reason is that they don't understand a deterministic grammar rule over here, that the parallel entities need not appear to be parallel from the visual standpoint. Their role has to be parallel, their role has to be same. So in this case, government regulation and the coming to an end play the exact same role. Okay, so that's very important. When we say two entities have to be parallel, we don't mean that they should look exactly the same, right? What we mean is, or what the grammar construct is, that the roles played by the entity need to be exactly the same, right? And that is, they have to be functionally parallel. Thank you. And that is exactly what we teach in one of the very integral concept files in parallelism module in the course. Okay, so very important to understand what is the rule, and not get swayed. I mean, this is an example of a student who would give grammar actually more importance than meaning, and thereby not really realizing the key essence behind sentence correction. So I hope that you have understood why is it that the correct sentence is absolutely correct, and what is it that you should avoid in order to get in this non-constructive way of handling SC. Okay, so if you have any doubts, definitely go through the parallelism concept, our parallelism module in our course. Okay, so let's now go into our second question. And sorry, here is the question. So, but first, let me get the poll here. Okay, so if you can all please click on still solving. Let's get this number beyond 50 this time. Okay, we're getting there. All right, let's solve question number 2. 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. And let's get your confidence level. Okay, I see only about one third of the class is extremely confident. Okay, all right. So let's now take this away. Now, this is a sentence which is fairly convoluted. When I say convoluted, it's pretty long. There's lots going on in this sentence. Now, when we talk about visualization, again, visualization is the key thing. You need to do that. There is no second doubts about it, right? You've already seen the evidence of that. But there are different tools to visualize the sentence, right? And one of the integral tools is coming up with the sentence structure. So you see this long sentence. Instead of reading this long sentence in one breath and understanding the meaning of this entire chunk altogether, what you do is you pause at appropriate points in the sentence. You assimilate the meaning of whatever small chunk you have read. For example, although appearing less appetizing than most of their round and red supermarket cousins, you pause here. You understand what the sentence is saying here. Essentially, it's talking about some kind of tomato over here. So here you don't even know that is a tomato. It's basically saying that something appears less appetizing than something else, right? And then there is a contrast here, as is evident by the word although. So you are going to be seeing a contrast in the sentence. So right now, what you did was you paused here, you understood the meaning of whatever you read. Then you bring in the next chunk, heirloom tomatoes. Okay, so yeah, so there are two entities being compared here. One is heirloom tomatoes, then the other is their round and red supermarket cousins. And heirloom tomatoes appear less appetizing than these good, better looking supermarket cousins. Okay, grown from seeds saved during the previous year. This part now describes heirloom tomatoes. It gives more information about heirloom tomatoes, that how are they grown. They're grown from seeds that are saved during the previous year. They are often green and striped or have plenty of bumps and bruises. So it's again describing more about the appearance of heirloom tomatoes, right? Further description. Heirlooms are more flavorful and thus in increasing demand. And now you see, okay, the author initially said that heirlooms appear less appetizing. They don't look as good. And then and we knew there was a contrast. Oh, here's what the contrast is. Heirlooms are more flavorful and thus in increasing demand. So yes, they may look less appetizing, but they are more yummy, and which is why they are in increasing demand. Now, this is how you visualize the sentence. You create an image in your mind of the sentence, not by reading the entire sentence as one big chunk, but by pausing. And at every pause point, you assimilate the meaning of the sentence. And then you take that assimilated meaning as you move on to the next chunks of the sentence, right? This is the tool called as sentence structure. Okay. And this is the tool that gets you to visualize such long, complex sentences. Now, if you have this sentence structure in your head, and if I were to ask you these questions, and again, I've already answered these questions while explaining, while actually creating the sentence structure, but let's go through the exercise. What kind of tomatoes appears less appetizing? Heirloom tomatoes, right? What does green and striped or have bumps and bruises imply? So you're reading these different descriptors and you're trying to understand, why has the author used that descriptor? What is the role of that descriptor in the sentence? And you're not wondering about what grammatical role it plays. It is there in the sentence. You're trying to understand, what does it, why has the author this expressed, included this part in this sentence to actually communicate that these are not attractive. The author already set the stage, saying that although appearing less appetizing, now the author is describing what does the author actually mean by not by appearing less appetizing, right? What are green and striped or have bumps and bruises? Heirloom tomatoes. So look, I mean, as you think about these things, as you read the sentence, these are the linkages that you are creating in your head. So now those words that you see in the sentence, they are all creating, they have been in they are now uh, very very well etched in your mind, right? What are more flavorful? Heirloom tomatoes. What is the contrast? Heirloom tomatoes don't look as good as others, but heirloom tomatoes taste great. And with this, after you create the sentence, I'm going to ask you, once I gave you the sentence structure, how confident were you to come up with the answers of these questions? Once I gave you the sentence structure, you were very confident, right? Because it's there, right? Now, yes, how do you come up with this sentence structure? That's a completely different story, right? And we'll talk about that. That's very important, because that's the skill that you absolutely need to build. We understand that, right? And that's the reason why we created a standalone course, a course that's dedicated to teaching you how is it that you come up with this sentence structure. And that course is called Master Comprehension. That's the foundation course of everything verbal on the GMAT. Okay, but what I want you to understand right now is, given this sentence structure, right, how confident were you to answer these questions? And you can see that majority of the class was extremely confident. Okay. And also, I mean, you need to have that goal in your head, that you're not just reading the words. You have to link things. When you are reading, they are often green and striped or have plenty of bumps and bruises. You're not thinking about, oh, this thing is within this dash pair. Is it an independent clause? Is it a modifier? No, those thoughts should not even cross your mind. All that you have to think about, and all that's important for you to get to that 90th percentile, is, what role does this play? Why has the author put this bit of sentence over here? What are these group of words telling me? That's all that matters. Now, how many of you, when you were reading the sentence while solving the question, thinking about the role of dash, is it independent clause, is the punctuation correct, how many of you were thinking about that, at the expense of thinking about what is the meaning of the sentence? Some of you were thinking about it, right? And again, you would not, so those of you who were not, good, right? But those of you who are, thank you for being honest about it, right? Because that's the key to you. And as long as you understand that, okay, that's not a fruitful exercise, I'm happy, right? Because then you will learn what is actually the right way of solving it. Okay. Now, when another thing to notice over here, as you see the,
Pile. Just I want to
yeah, go ahead, buddy.
interrupt on this. If you can go back to that one slide. So just
Sure.
to clarify, when Pile said that while reading you shouldn't worry about it, she doesn't mean that you shouldn't know what the role that a dash plays or an independent clause is. Just to be very clear, it's just that when you're reading the sentence, you should focus on understanding what role does this play, and that's something that's extremely important. It's like what your focus should be on while doing an act, and so that's something that I want to make sure that you understand from this exercise, because while solving a question at different times, you ought to be doing different things. So sorry, Payal, just wanted to
No,
make
no,
sure I clarify.
absolutely. Absolutely, very important. I mean, yes. I mean, later on in the session, we talk about deterministic grammatical errors, right? So, yes, absolutely. So thank you, Rajat, for chiming in. When you're reading the sentence to understand the meaning, at that point in time, you should not be worried about the grammatical constructs or what is so is the dash correct or not. At that point, your goal should be to understand what is the author trying to say. Okay. Now, when you move on to the second step, and I'll show you as to what the second step in the e-GMAT meaning based process is, that's when you start to look for deterministic errors. So we'll come to that point. But okay, so now let's talk about the grammatical error. So yes, so this was a good segue to that. After you create the sentence structure and after you understand, visualize the meaning of the sentence, the second thing that you have to do is you have to identify, are there any deterministic grammar errors in the sentence as is. Now, what do I mean by deterministic errors? Your subject verb errors. Subject verb don't agree in number, subject verb don't make sense, your pronoun antecedent number errors, your verb tense errors, and those are all your modifier placement errors. Those are all deterministic errors, right? That's what you have to focus on through the sentence structure. And because you have created the sentence structure now, identification of those deterministic grammatical errors becomes really straightforward. Now, observe over here. The first part of the sentence here, although appearing less appetizing than most of their round and red supermarket cousins, is is describing is basically the appearing part is describing heirloom tomatoes, but heirloom tomatoes has no verb whatsoever, right? They are is a subject verb pair. Heirlooms are more flavorful. That's another subject verb pair, right? But heirloom tomatoes by itself does not have any verb. So that's a very evident error that you see right there. Okay. Now, with the with this enhanced understanding of the meaning, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to take another stab at this question. Okay. So what I will and again, as I said, I will give you, we did the first step, which is visualize the meaning of the sentence. Through sentence structure, we identified all the deterministic errors in the sentence. Now step number 3 is to analyze answer choices, right? That is what I want you all to do. Now we have done steps 1 and 2 together now. Okay. Now, what is the output of the first two steps? The output of the first step, you can see, is this mental image in your head in the form of a table. There are two entities, tomato 1, tomato 2. Tomato 1 is round and red, tomato 2 is heirloom. Tomato 1 looks better, tomato 2 does not look that good. In some description, tomato 1 is less flavorful, tomato 2 is more flavorful, and so on, right? So you have this, all those words have been converted into this simple table in your head. And number 2, you know from grammar standpoint, deterministic grammatical errors, there is no verb for heirloom tomatoes. Okay. Now, with this renewed understanding, after doing steps 1 and 2 of the process, what I'm going to ask you to do is take another stab at looking at the answer choices and then selecting the correct answer choice. Okay. Let's see if any of you change your original response. So go ahead and select the answer now. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Interesting. So it seems that, Rajat, any observations?
So I think one of the things which is very clear is before we broadcast the results
Yeah,
that that I think this exposes
yeah.
where people need help and
Hmm.
and 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 and, and exposes again the the extent to which they need to work on the sentence structures, map elements of a sentence or entities in long sentences to the corresponding sources. So I think that's something that this demonstrates. So yeah, I'll let you
Mhm.
translate what I just said into tangible
Yes.
items.
Yeah. So my next slides actually. So why I asked Rajat to draw an inference over here was because this was a little bit. So I won't say unexpected. I would have expected. So let me broadcast the results. So on the top you see the redo poll. More. So choice B is the correct answer. So let's come over here and I'll explain to you as to why choice B is the correct answer. But you can see not that many people moved from from other incorrect answer choices to choice B. Okay. And this was a little bit, puzzling to me, given that we've already done the analysis, and which is what Rajat said, that yes, you do the analysis, but but this means that there is a lot more effort required on your side to understand how is it that you utilize the sentence structure to come up with the grammatical errors. How is it that you create sentence structure for the incorrect answer choices to see, is there the same grammatical error or are there other grammatical errors? Also, it means that you have to focus more on the meaning aspect as well. And that is evident from choice D. And I'll talk about each one of these choices in detail now. Okay. So it exposes the areas where this group of people definitely need to put in more effort. And we have the tools for that. That's why I'm not nervous. That's why I'm actually very positive that you guys, we would be able to tell you where you need to put in the effort, and we would be able to provide you with the right kind of tools so that you can get to that 90th percentile. Okay.
I
That's the
just wanna
objective
just
here.
wanna just wanna add a few things. So as Pal, I noticed a few things. One is, you know, um, when Pal said choice B is the correct answer, so a few more people choose choice B. I want to just make sure you guys understand. This is not a place where we are there to judge you. Our judging you doesn't get you that 700 score. You being honest gets you that 700 score. So if you get to the answer, don't choose that answer saying, "Oh, I got this right," because that doesn't take you any even an iota of an inch closer to that 700 score. On the other hand, if you're honest with yourself, if you understand what skills you need to build and why you need to build those skills, that takes you closer to that 700 score. Why? Because that's you're accepting what's needed. So whether you get something right or not is immaterial in this session. Whether you get something right or not is immaterial. What's important is do you understand where you need to improve, and do you pledge to put effort in that direction to improve? And so just want to make sure that's something that you really just say. The best way you're going to make use of this session is by being honest with yourself, A, and B, by participating. With that, Pal, again, sorry to interrupt, but I think that's something which is really important.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I did not realize that I had
Oh,
not
you
told
were
the
you were
poll.
teaching, so I kind
Yes.
of saw that.
Yeah.
So I think let's kind of talk about choices A and C and why is it that because earlier more people had choice C there, and the moment you said choice B, they kind of moved from C to B
Yes. Yes.
overall.
Okay.
So
So I'm
so
going to
you
show
should
you a very.
yeah, you should discuss choice C.
Yeah. So all right. Let's go on to. So we'll come to choice D. Choice C. Right. Okay. So the way to think about choice C is, if you look at the sentence structure here, choices A and C. So observe the sentence structure here, and I want you guys to speak now. Okay. Compare. So you see both choices on the screen, A and C. We have already done the analysis on choice A. Tell me, what is the difference between choices A and C? And you see the difference right there, highlighted on the screen. I want you to explicitly state what that difference is. And does that do anything to, they appear? Yes. They appear is in choice C, appearing is in choice A, right? But as such, does they appear make choice C correct? Does they appear make choice C correct? No, absolutely not. Appearing less appetizing, they appear less appetizing. Doesn't change anything. It's just a different way of expressing, right? The only thing over here is, whatever was the error in choice A, heirloom tomato still doesn't have a verb. No other issue over here. right? So the reason, if choice A was wrong, then choice C is also wrong. So for quite a few of you, even after us doing steps 1 and 2 together, you still selected choice C as the correct answer. This means that the skill that you are still lacking in is creating sentence structure and observing what errors exist in that choice. Okay, now in this case, it's not that you have to create sentence structure from scratch for choice C. Here, when you are doing answer choice analysis, you've already done the analysis of choice A. So when you come to choice C, you see, okay, they actually are pretty similar sentence structure. So I don't have to create one from scratch, right? So whatever is the error in choice A is also in choice C. Okay, is this point clear? Yes, no? Let me get a yes, no poll as well.
And I think this is where the doing that sentence structure up front helps you do the process of elimination much more efficiently.
So you spend that time upfront to analyze choice A completely in its entirety, and that analysis helps you significantly when you're doing answer choice analysis, thereby reducing all that back and forth. Okay, because now you're looking at the answer choices in the light of the analysis that you have already done. That is the key part over here. Now, let me also talk about choice D. Remember when we talked about, not remember, it's very clear, although is the word here, right? There is a contrast here. You've understood the contrast. What is a contrast? Although appearing less appetizing, heirloom tomatoes are indeed more flavorful, right? Now, choice D, observe choice D and tell me, where is the contrast word? Choice D is stated over here. Where is the contrast word? Because quite a few of you selected choice D. And again, when it comes to and doing answer choice analysis, as Rajat said, when you look at an answer choice, you're now making sure that all the key elements, all the aspects that you visualize from the sentence are actually being communicated from uh, by the choice that you're about to select as the correct answer. Contrast should have been there, right? That is the visualization that you did over here, that had to be front and center in your analysis of the answer choices. So when you selected choice D, you did not find that contrast word, and you selected it because you didn't think that the contrast word was important. And that's a very big failure mechanism. So, all of those who selected choice D, do you understand where you faltered? Do you understand, despite doing the analysis, you didn't take that analysis further in the answer choices? And that's a recipe for disaster. Comments here? Okay, now,
I just want to add one thing, Pal, just some context. This is
mhm,
something I had not thought about it while we were designing the session. We talked about definitive grammatical errors, and I think there are a lot more definitive meaning-based errors than you
mhm.
have grammatical errors, given the plethora of sentence structures that exist and the plethora of um, meanings that GMAT tries to make sure that that's expressed properly. So that's something that contrast is a very definitive meaning error that you see in choice D.
Yes. And again, your goal with SC is to communicate the logical intended meaning of the author, right? In choice A, it's very evident that the author wants to express that contrast. In choice D, there's no contrast. Grammatically, choice D is absolutely fine, right? But there's no contrast. Now, I have a question here. Less appetizing is not a contrast word? Absolutely not. Less appetizing is simply a comparison word. Okay. Okay, now I see a question here. Could you please tell us what should be the sentence structure before a dash? Should there be a dependent clause, or we can just have the noun here, heirloom tomatoes that it describes? This is where I got confused. Thank you for asking that question. In fact, I do have a slide on this, not answering the question, frankly, but I want you to tell me, why is that important? You've asked this question, you're thinking about the sentence structure, but why is that even important in the scheme of things that we are looking at? Right? Choice D is completely wrong because of there's no contrast here whatsoever, right? We talked about choice C over here. Choice C is wrong because it has a very deterministic error, right? We'll talk about choice E as well, okay? Choice E has a different sentence structure, but if you create the sentence structure again over here, you will see that heirloom tomatoes has no verb, okay? Now, when you see all these deterministic errors, right, where is the question of even, and let me go back to the question slide now. So let me go back there. Here on slide. Okay. Yeah, this slide. Ask yourself, choice B is the correct answer, right? Why, where is the concern of dash even come about over here? Choice D no doesn't express the contrast. Choice C, A, and E don't have verb for heirloom tomatoes. So the question that you're wondering about and that you're confused about, that's a learning that you have to take. That you have to prioritize the. You need to know what is important in the grand scheme of things. Your meaning based errors and your deterministic errors, they are a lot more important than any of these other seemingly important errors. Okay, and that's a very important learning. Is that clear? I mean, one of the first grammatical concepts that all of us learn is every subject needs to have a verb. Okay, that's the ground, that's the basic principle behind a sentence, right? That's the first thing that we learn. Okay, now there is no verb over here for in three answer choices. Okay, one answer choice, there is no contrast, right? That's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. And this is a 700 plus level question. I chose the right answer, but I didn't identify any verb and noun entity. The choice B makes more sense to me. So I'm doing good, or am I on the path of grammatical disaster? Uh, See, you have to identify deterministic errors. So if you selected choice B as the correct answer because it made more sense to you, I mean, you have to, again, it's very important to reject each answer choice on solid grounds. Solid grounds are grounds of meaning and deterministic errors. So if you are not focusing on these deterministic errors, then you do have to build your skill set. Okay, that is required. Okay, can you explain a little more on why E is wrong? Absolutely. I have the slide on that. So let's look at that. Now, choices A and E, the sentence structure is different for both the choices, right? Choice A starts with although appearing, choice E starts with heirloom tomato. So when you look at that, you should not get worried about it. But what you should do is make sure that you create sentence structure of choice E, but not from the scratch but not from scratch. You have to utilize the understanding that you already have from your analysis of choice A. So you already know grown from seeds saved during the previous year is linked with heirloom tomatoes and it's placed appropriately, although they appear less appetizing. So basically the placement has been switched over here, right? So if you they are often green and striped or have plenty of bruises, heirlooms are more flavorful. So what you see over here is sentence structure is still at its core the same. It's just that the placement of heirloom tomatoes and although they appear has actually switched. That's about it. So you just spend those 5 seconds extra on choice E to formulate the sentence structure in your head, and then you essentially think about, oh, heirloom tomato still doesn't have a verb in this sentence. And that's why this sentence is wrong. So do you guys see how choice E analysis needs to be done a little bit more? I mean, you need to spend more little bit more time on choice E than you needed to spend on choice C, because choice C was exactly same sentence structure. Right? But here it's slightly different. So you spend 5 to 10 seconds more on choice E, but you arrive at the same conclusion because you have already done that level of analysis and you know what it is that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
And I think that time's really well spent because once you do that analysis, you won't even ask the question, does it even communicate the same meaning? Why? Because there's a deterministic error there, you reject it and you go forward. So
Absolutely.
that time spent saves a lot of time.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to um, talk about this part over here, that we uncovered one. So there's this skill of sentence structure that's absolutely vital, without which you cannot get to 90th percentile. Okay, that you have to, because your SC sentences are not going to be straightforward simple sentences. They are going to be, convoluted sentences, the one that we just saw. In fact, our next example is even one step further. So we are going to have a good time with that sentence. But to for because we recognize that this is a skill which is required. That's the reason why we have built the master comprehension course, and Rajat is going to walk you through that. But that's a skill which I would want each one of you to work on, because that's the skill that's going to get you to that 90th percentile. Because utilizing sentence structure, you will be able to visualize the meaning of the sentence. Okay, but there's one more thing that I want to talk about, which is that it's important to know where to spend your time, right? And that's what we have been telling you. Spend the time visualizing the meaning. Build your skill set to understand what the author is saying. Build your skill set to understand, to create that sentence structure. But I also want to talk about where to not spend your time, because your time is limited, your bandwidth is limited, right? So which is why I want to I want to say, don't let the fear of missing out overburden your brain. What do I mean by that? I mean by that, what I mean is, look at this discussion on this question on GMAT Club. There are 4 pages of discussion happening on this sentence, okay, on this question. As such, if you think about it, all the sentences, the skill set required over here is visualization. Once you build that skill set, once you build the skill set of sentence structure, there is no doubt that you would be able to solve this question correctly, because there's nothing more to it. Yet there are 4 pages of discussion happening on this question, and what happens is that when you when you see the discussion, you inadvertently feel, oh, am I missing out on something? My fellow test takers are going through discussion. Am I missing out on something? And you also end up spending that time. How many of you go through that thought process in your head when you see that there is so much of discussion happening? Yes or no? How many of you go through that thought process? I want you to not waste your time over there. And again, think of questions such as how to tackle the use of dash in a sentence. Can I say that E is wrong because 2 consecutive modifiers can't modify one thing? Now, when you read this question by itself, you're like, is there a rule that I'm not privy to? Am I missing out on something? Right? I mean, your brain is going to go into these different tangents, which are truly tangents, which are not going to help you get to that 90th percentile. Okay, explain the difference between A and B, as in both the case there is a dependent clause followed by an independent clause. Now we discussed the entire question to death. Was there any discussion about dependent clause or independent clause? Right? In options A and C, why aren't we canceling out although they appear, to check if the statement makes sense, as it's a modifier, like we cancel out modifier grown? I mean, just the whole point of canceling out certain parts of the sentence, that is absolutely alien to me. And I want you to ask, and lot of times students come and ask us that question, and we are like, my response to them is what you see over here. When you read articles on New York Times or Economist or any of the case studies that you are doing or that you will be doing, do you ask such questions to understand the meaning of the sentence? Do you say that, okay, can I omit this part? No. You simply read all the parts of the sentence to understand what is it that the author is trying to tell you. Then why is it that such an important section on the GMAT you would take this approach? And that is something which I want you all to guard against. Don't get into these, I don't know, tricks or whatever is floating out over there. And don't go into these discussions because you feel that there is a lot of value add over here, because your time is precious. Raja, do you want to add anything here?
I actually wanted to show an example to really say what happens when you cancel stuff out. Let me just do this real time.
Sure, yeah.
So Let's just, no, this is not the example. So let's see. So this is an example. So Rohit said Google is an excellent buy. When you are, and I don't know if that's what these guys really kind of say, but I think in action that's what they're really saying. If you look at this sentence in its entirety, you're just communicating information with regards to what Rohit said. Now, the moment you cancel this part out, okay, you're just changing the entire thing. Why? Because now you're saying Google is an excellent buy. You are the one who's making that claim. Changes the meaning completely. Can't do that in sentences. That's not what GMAT is about. And I saw another question when someone asked. They said, "Can we pre-think what the author intends to really say in GMAT sentence correction?" I like the word pre-thinking. It's an e-GMAT word. We announced this in 2011. And yes, you can, because remember this: every sentence has an intended meaning, and there I'd like you to guess. If you read OG 2022, can you guess in the introduction section? There are about 12 pages of introduction to GMAT sentence correction. Can you guess how many times does the OG use the word intended meaning? Can you guys guess that? Put that number in the short answer pod. The word intended meaning. 30, good. Let's look at a few other guesses. Yes. The correct answer is 19 times. In 10 to 12 pages 19 times. And the reason why I really say this is because there are some people who said there is nothing called intended meaning in sentence correction. I want to ask them, go read the official guide, then come back and tell me why is it that the official guide would use the word intended meaning 19 times. 19 times over there. So yes, you can figure out what the author intends to communicate. And these two examples tell you exactly that. In example number one, or in question number one, if the author did not intend by the end of, you wouldn't have been, or by coming to the end, then you wouldn't have chosen choice C. You might have chosen choices D or E, both of which were grammatically perfect, by the way. And in question number two, if there were no contrast, if the author did not intend to present a contrast, then choice D would have been correct as well. So yes, intended meaning is important. Pal.
You can continue, Rajat. I was done with that question. Rajat, you're muted, I think.
So overall, what's the theme that you're getting so far with regards to the two questions that we have answered? What do you think is essential to acing GMAT sentence correction? Meaning, okay. Focus on meaning. Okay. Understand the intended meaning. Now we solved two very, very different questions. The first question, much simpler sentence. You could get the meaning if you focused on it, but most of you did not focus, and those who even did focus did not visualize. So when we say the word meaning in the e-GMAT way of meaning-based approach, that's the approach that we pioneered. We talk about visualization. So you've got to visualize the thing. You've got to make sure that thing is happening in front of you, because only you get that meaning only when you visualize this. Okay. Question number two is a much more complex sentence, and that's why you have that in front of you. And so for you to be able to visualize that meaning, it had a contrast in there. The sentence structure was much more complex. You needed to do to that sentence structure there to achieve that same output, to have that ability to visualize the meaning and to be able to identify the errors in the original sentence. Really, really important. Okay. And you've got to do this in this particular order. Read the sentence, identify and visualize the meaning, and then go and identify the grammatical errors and focus on deterministic errors only. The reason why you've got to do it in this sequence is because once you understand what the author intends to say, you will be able to figure out those modifier errors. Again, the deterministic modifier errors. The deterministic errors where elements of a parallel list are not functionally parallel. Okay. Um, so that's something which is very important, that I want you to really do this. And once you do that, your accuracy will be high, You'll reject answer choices quickly, which is where your time to answer questions would go down as well. Okay. So in this question, we introduced a new tool called sentence structure, and that's important for you to be to be able to essentially visualize that meaning and identify those errors and achieve this output, which helps you get to that 90th percentile ability. So the question is, how do you excel at identifying sentence structure? Because it's not something that you do within a day. It's something that requires very conscious effort, and this is where we built this course called the Master Comprehension course, because that's where you master sentence structure. And this is where you start with stuff such as building blocks of a sentence. Hold on, my pen is there. So we start with the simplest thing that's out there, a two-word sentence. um, John runs, and we go from that two-word sentence to essentially a 25-word sentence, which is what the Heirloom tomatoes was. And we really say, okay, how is complexity added while keeping the meaning and the structure consistent? So that's something that goes in that building blocks of a sentence. You see, there are about 5 learning activities. There's about 3.5 hours of learning content just in this case. Now, there's a certain level of willingness that's also needed for you to learn anything new, not just sentence structure, but learn anything new. You get this 3.5 hours, you get the framework, and but then after that, you've got to apply that framework while reading anything. If you don't do that, if you just take the GMAT as something that you're going to do within those that hour and a half, you're not going to get to that 90th percentile. Yes, you're going to study during that hour and a half, but whatever you've studied, you've got to consciously apply it while doing your work. And one thing that you're going to really see is that you get much better at doing your work. You get much more efficient at doing your work. Why? Because if you've got to increase your speed on the GMAT, you've got to prove that you're going to increase your speed while doing your work, because essentially the skills that the GMAT tests are the same skills that a manager needs, and you better start behaving like a manager if you want to get an MBA from a top B school. The second piece that I want to make sure is this piece, pause points over here. And why? Because when you're reading, this is where this module tells you where should you pause, how should you assimilate the meaning, how should you do that visualization. Make sure you do that as you go through it. If you simply go through this module and um, not assimilate these behaviors in your day-to-day life, and trust me, it doesn't take a lot of effort to do it. It only takes willingness to do it. And once you start doing it, the rewards in your day-to-day life, not just on the GMAT, but in terms of conversations in your day-to-day life, in terms of your ability to comprehend and act in your day-to-day life, they're so rich that once you start doing it, you're not going to stop doing it. We still do it, yeah, even though a lot of these are innate, because that's when we don't overburden our brain. That's when we are able to get more output and be more productive overall. Okay. Just to tell you how comprehensive this entire course is, there are about 12 learning activities here, about 50 plus examples, just to tell you how to learn and visualize. Okay. In addition to that, this is not where this ends. This is the beginning of your ability to do that sentence structure and learn to visualize. In addition to this, you also continue learning this through the application files and practice quizzes in our core sentence correction course. And this is there about 30 odd application files or 33 learning activities here, about 140 more examples. And one thing that you really see on the e-GMAT platform is wherever you see this percentage, this is not a percentage completion. This is feedback on how well you've done that learning activity, and this is feedback that's personalized to you. Make use of that feedback wherever the system says revise. Focus on revision there and revise there and there. I'm going to talk a bit more about winning behavior slightly later on, but you're going to see that. Okay. And then it continues on in Scholarinium. Now master comprehension and sentence correction course, 70 to 80% of that learning happens. Beyond that, you only need refinement. There are certain sentence structures that may be alien to you. You learn those sentence structures in Scholarinium, and this is where the solutions in Scholarinium, many of them are video solutions. But overall, about 446 practice questions in Scholarinium. These are all original questions. They help you refine and get to that 90th percentile ability. Just to tell you how comprehensive this is twice as many questions as you get in the official guide. Okay, so where do you master sentence structure? Throughout the e-GMAT course, but the foundation starts here. The learning continues here and the excellence happens here. Okay, with that, Payal, over to you.
All right. So, how are you all doing? We have gone through two questions. We've learned visualization and sentence structure as the key skills. Overwhelmed. I could kind of get the sense of that. Why are you overwhelmed? Elaborate a little bit on that. And what about the others? How are you guys doing right now? What's going on in your head? We have one very interesting question that I want to discuss. Enlightened. Okay, that's good. Um, I have a lot of learning to do, have a better vision. That's what I want to see. I have a lot of learning to do. That's zest that yes, I can do it. I need to put in a lot of effort. Yes, that identification, that realization is what both Rajat and I are looking for from you. Don't be petrified, seriously, because again, you should be looking at it in a very positive way, that you understand where is it that you're faltering, you understand what is the vision, you understand the path to get there, right? And after we discuss question 3, Rajat is going to outline that path, okay? And that is going to be very, very enlightening for all of you, I'm sure. So with that, let's
Payal,
look at.
I just want to add to that overwhelming piece over here. So I think one thing we've got to understand is, a lot of us think about, I want to do an MBA. And because everyone around me is doing an MBA, and we don't translate and visualize, and we're going to see those terms come out of my mouth again and again, into what it means. When you say you're going to do an MBA, what you are really saying, especially if you want to do an MBA from the US, I'm going to make multi-million-dollar investment decisions 3 years into graduation. This is what you're signing up for, where you are responsible for that money. And so the reason I'm saying that is because what I talked about is just about 40 to 45 hours of learning, which, by the way, many of you have already spent 40, 50 hours. Many of you who are here have already spent 40, 50 hours trying to excel in sentence correction by practicing hundreds of questions, which is a very non-deterministic way of excelling in GMAT SE, and it doesn't work 80% of the time. What we are giving you is a deterministic way that requires about 30 to 40 hours of effort. Yes, you need to learn that. You have that realization, but don't be afraid of it because it's deterministic, it's enriching, and you're not shooting in the dark. That's something you've got to recognize and be happy about it. Don't be afraid of learning, because the only way you're going to deserve that 180K salary post your MBA, if you're looking for an MBA in the US or Europe, is if you are excited about learning and applying what you've learned. And this is a precursor to that habit of learning and applying that you have to adopt anyhow post your MBA as well as during your MBA. Okay. Pile, over to you.
Yeah, very insightful words, Rajat. Okay, so let's look at the last question. Now, for this question, again, click on still solving, and I'll give you a little tool tip here for this question. When you are, I want you to visualize the meaning of the sentence, okay? Explicitly visualize it, okay? And as you are reading the chunks of the sentence, don't get in the nitty gritty details of what does this verb ing modifier modify. Don't think about those things. Just think about as if you're reading this sentence to explain for a friend, right? And you are helping that friend write the sentence in an appropriate manner, in grammatically correct manner, so that so that your friend can communicate the meaning that they want to communicate, right? That's the approach that I want you to have as you look at the sentence. Because if you look at the sentence just without having that context in head, you will get confused. Okay, so here is yeah, so go ahead and answer this question, and then we'll have a good discussion on this one. Last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Okay. So, what's your confidence level for this question? Okay, I see more people who are extremely confident that as compared to for the other questions. Okay, good. How was this question? Let's hear from you, and then we'll go into the discussion of this one. How did you approach this question? I'm getting the poll here. Were you able to visualize the meaning? How did you go about answering this question? So if you look at the sentence here, meaning and structure pause, yes, it was easy. Good, very nice. If you look at this sentence, if I were to read this sentence, visualization helped. I'm very happy to see that, and I can see that in the output as well. Okay, um, if you look at the sentence here, there are these parts here, and if I were to read the sentence, I would read it by pausing at these transition points and assimilating the meaning. That's very important. So I'm hoping that you all did that, and I can see over here with your response as well. Okay, able to visualize meaning, but still unable to select choice with 100% conviction, and we'll get there. The point is, this is the most difficult sentence question in the session, and if just by spending that 1 hour with us, you're able to get to the point wherein you're saying you are able to visualize the meaning, that is an absolutely amazing outcome. Okay, and the fact that you tried to understand the meaning and you didn't worry about anything else, that's absolutely amazing. Okay, so let's look at this sentence. About 5 million acres in the United States have been invaded by leafy spurge. So, as soon as you read that part, leafy spurge, you think about, okay, what is that? I mean, that you may not know what leafy spurge is, but you may just, yeah, you may just think about replace it, invaded by something, right? And then you see a herbaceous plant, which means that you're talking about, weeds. Right. So essentially, the question is, what is leafy spurge? uh, the, the sentence actually tells you leafy spurge is a plant from Eurasia, right? So you actually get that answer in the question itself. What has milky sap? That with milky sap, so what thing has milky sap? It's the leafy spurs that has milky sap. Okay, what gives mouth sores to cattle? It's the milky sap in the leafy spurs that gives mouth sores to cattle. So as you're reading this sentence, what I want you to do is I want you to think about, visualize these different parts: leafy spurge, weeds. uh, an image of weeds needs to come in your head. Milky sap, a little milky stuff coming out of the weed needs to come in your head. Mouth sores to cattle, cattle eating those weeds need to pop in your head. And then mouth sores, yes, it won't be a pretty picture, but yes, you need to know that something painful, something not very pleasant is happening to the cattle, right? So that is what you so far we have read the sentence till this point, right? So let me now summarize the meaning of this blue part that we have read. Cattle eat leafy spurge, there's milky sap in this leafy spurge that gives mouth sores to cattle, and cattle get mouth sores. Everybody good with this? Very clear so far? So we are not concerned about, okay, does the milky sap give cattle those mouth sores, or does the leafy spurge give those mouth sores to the cattle? What we are understanding is what is happening here. We are visualizing that. We are trying to convert those words into that mental image in our head, right? Now we read the next part of the sentence, right? Displacing grasses and other cattle food. Now you already know that the author has said that there's this big area in the United States that has been invaded by leafy spurge. Displacing grasses, invasion. When there is invasion, obviously something has been taken over. right? So you automatically, you're now not looking at displacing grasses and other cattle food and thinking about, okay, it's a verb ing word, what does it modify? You're not thinking about that right now. Right now, in step number 1, you're thinking about, okay, what are we talking about here, right? The author said that there's been invasion by these weeds. Invasion means it must have obviously displaced something. Okay, it must have actually displaced these grasses and other cattle food. Now that mental image is what displaces grasses and other cattle food. It's these leafy spurge, right? And rendering rangeland worthless. Now you basically think about, okay, what has rendered rangeland worthless? You've read everything else before the sentence. Now obviously there's this invasion that has happened, right? And there are these mouth sores that are going on, right? So there must be some linkage over here. So now you put everything together and you essentially understand what is actually happening. Leafy spurge has displaced grasses. There's these weeds all over, right, where there used to be grasses. Cattle end up eating that leafy spurge. They get the mouth sores because these weeds have milky sap in it. And that whole thing actually leads to the rangeland being worthless. And you can just think about it. If cattle is getting mouth sores, it's not a pleasant experience. So that cattle may reduce the intake of this weed. Whereas if this weed had not invaded these grasses, the cattle would have continued to eat the grass, which means that the rangeland would not have been worthless. So there's that automatic linkage that is happening after, in your head, after you have read each and every part of the sentence. But look at all of this analysis. You're not thinking about grammar right now. You're thinking about, you are author's friend and you're trying to understand what is the author trying to tell. Okay, and you're creating that image in your head. Does this make sense? Does this exercise seem useful? Do you see how this, doing this exercise can actually take away the pressure of the, I would say, the pressure which is not even required, right? Do you see that? Had I not told you to don't worry about the what the modifier modifies, to get away from grammar, right? Would you have had this level of understanding of the sentence? And that is the power of visualization. If you read the sentence with the intent to understand what the author is saying, your job of the whole experience of SC changes. Now I want you to take another stab at this sentence. Okay, you've understood what is going on in the sentence. Now I want you to think about grammar. Okay, because grammar is important, right? Just not in the first step. Okay, you've understood the entire sequence. Okay, and I'm not going to even identify what the errors in the original choice are. Okay, this time I want you to do that on your own. Okay, so I want you to, now you've understood what the author wants to say. Okay, and I'm going to show you that again. Okay, now, tell me what the correct answer is. Okay, let's go through the answer choices now. I'm going to end the poll right now. I see that there are more people who are leaning towards choice B. And yeah, so let me close the poll here. So choice E is not selected by anybody now. There are fewer people who are selecting choices D and B. Yeah. So okay. So let's go through each choice. And this is a difficult question, right? So now we're going to do step two of the process, which is to identify all the grammar errors. We've understood the meaning, right? Now we look at, has
While,
the
while
author,
just one other thing, you should really said when you said difficult, you should set the context. This is um, uh, in the difficult questions. This is at the top.
yeah,
So even amongst those questions in that pack, it is one of the top 10 difficult questions out there. Only about
yes.
20-25% of people get it right.
Yeah. So if you look at step number two for the of the process, what you're going to do is you're going to, given that understanding of the meaning, you're now going to identify, has the author used correct grammatical constructs to communicate what they want to express, right? So you look at this displacing and rendering. I'm going to ask you, does it make sense, given what you've understood here and you have the visualization right up on the screen? Does it make sense for displacing and rendering to be at the same level? Absolutely no. Right? So that is your first error here, right? You identify that and you're good to go. You reject choice A. But think about it. You spent that time to understand what the author wants to communicate, right? And only after spending that time you identify the grammar errors based on what the author wants to communicate, and then you reject that choice. Okay? The other choice about display the other error over here is that displacing modifies that in the existing construction in choice A, it appears that displacing modifies that gives mouth source, right? And that doesn't make sense at all. That's absolutely logical. The very fact that Milky Sap gives mouth source to cattle is does not displace grasses. Those are two absolutely different aspects of the sentence, right? So this modification is wrong. Now, even if you thought that, let's say, what if displacing modifies the main preceding clause, 5 acres in the United States have been invaded by leafy spurge, what if displacing modifies that? Then also that doesn't make sense. Why? Because your verb ing modifier always has to make sense with the subject of the modified entity. And that's a deterministic grammar rule that you should absolutely know. And if there's any one of you who's not comfortable with that, go through the verb ing modifier concept files that are available in the free trial to understand the this particular grammar rule. So on all on the modifier regards and parallelism regard, the choice A is wrong. Okay. Now let's move to choice B. Choice B is exactly what the author wants to communicate. And I highlighted with appropriate colors all the linkages over here. Leafy spurge gives mouth source to cattle. Now, some of you may think about, okay, but isn't it the milky sap that gives mouth source to cattle? The point is, again, which is where you have to understand, do you get that same sense, right? The cattle is eating leafy spurge because the leafy spurge has milky sap. That's why the cattle get mouth sores. But in a sense, the cattle gets mouth sores because the cattle eat that leafy spurge. Let's say if the cattle did not eat leafy spurge, then the very fact that the milky sap is there in the leafy spurge, would that have given mouth sores to the cattle? No, not at all, right? So you have to see what makes logical sense, and that is why you have to rise above the grammar part of the sentence and not get yourself wrapped up in that should modify milky sap and not that gives mouth sore should modify milky sap. Does that make sense? I mean, you have to think about it, what is happening logically. um, so overall choice B is absolutely correct. Now, why is it that you guys rejected choice B? There were quite a few of you, about 50% of the class rejected choice B. Why was that? And do you have any other questions about choice B? Now that you see the analysis of choice B in the context of what the author wants to communicate and in the context of the grammatical description of that. Rendering rangeland worthless. Again, over here, it's about over here, rendering rangeland worthless is actually giving you the result of the that gives mouth source to cattle and displaces grasses, and the very fact that that this leafy spurge gives mouth source and displaces grasses, these two facts have rendered rangeland worthless. Okay, so there are two things over here, one, and then this one is two. So the leafy spurge gives mouth source to cattle and leafy spurge displaces grasses. These two facts have actually rendered the rangeland worthless. Okay, now let's look at choice C. The quite a few, about 20% of you selected choice C. Here again, same thing. That gives mouth source to cattle and displacing. It's essentially this part over here that gives and displacing. These two are apparently parallel over here because these two are connected with and, but they are not grammatically parallel. That gives cannot be parallel to displacing. Now here again you may argue, here again you will understand from the deterministic error concepts that we have in our course in the parallelism module related to this. You see that that gives and displacing cannot be parallel because they are not structurally parallel, right? And there is a way to make them parallel. Okay, now I have a question. How about having and displacing? Where is having over here? There's no having here. Here is have been invaded. Okay, so in this choice, these two are grammatically not parallel, and that's why this choice is wrong. The moment you make that gives mouth source and that displaces grasses, this would be correct, and that's exactly what choice B is. Okay, now let's look at this choice here. Having been invaded. Now, here, 5 million acres displaces grasses and other cattle food and renders rangeland worthless. This is absolutely illogical. Very few of you selected this choice, about 6 of you selected this choice, right? Because now having been invaded, all of this part is now just an added information about the 5 million acres. It's as if once the 5 million acres were invaded by leafy spurge, these 5 million acres displaced the grasses, which is absolutely nonsensical. And then these 5 million acres rendered the rendered the rangeland worthless, and that's absolutely illogical.
Yeah, Payal, I think this is also a great point, and just for folks, Payal is actually suffering with fever, so that's why she's not as coherent as she would want to be. But this is a great point to really just say this is where had you done the sentence structure, if they had done this, if they do the sentence structure in their mind, they'd be able to really see how displaces and renders maps to 5 million acres in the U.S. And they would have really said this doesn't make sense, and this would have been absolutely clear to them. So this is the power of doing that sentence structure and in a question such as difficult as this one.
Okay, so I have a thank you, Rajat, for chiming in over here. I have another question here. I don't understand why that gives and displacing is not correct parallelism. So my feedback to you is that this is the conceptual understand concept gap that you have. So you definitely need to bridge that gap. So parallelism concept files, you're going to learn all the deterministic errors related to parallelism there. So definitely spend some time on that. Okay. Choice E is wrong. Again, there is no verb for 5 million acres. Again, had you made the sentence structure here, that would have been absolutely evident. Okay. Then illogical. Milky sap giving mouth source to the cattle and displacing grasses. So here you see that milky sap is modified by two things, giving and displacing. Now giving a mouth source is fine, right? But displacing grasses, it's not the milky sap that displaces grasses. So this choice is also wrong. Okay. And Rajat has made a very interesting parallel sentence, a simple one. Yeah, go ahead, Rajat.
Go ahead, pal. So to that doubt.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in this, if I gave you this sentence, he lives in India and eating chicken. Do you think lives and eating are parallel here? Do you think that? No, that's exactly what that sentence is doing. Again, simplified sentence structures allows you to kind of evaluate those fragments and make such decisions in real time. I made this sentence in real time. Why? Because I understood what your doubt was. And the fundamental concept is when you look at entities that need to be parallel, they need to be functionally parallel. And say, are they functionally parallel or do they play the same role? I'll over to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So then again, I would say in the whole scheme, in this question, what did we focus on? what was the primary thing that we did? We visualized the sentence, right? We understood what is it that the author wants to communicate without getting bogged down by, what is this modifying, what is that modifying, and all that, right? I do have a question here with choice C. Let me take that. I don't know, where are you seeing having? That's something which I'm confused about. Having and displacing be parallel. Either you're getting confused with choice D, which had having been invaded, having Milky Sap. Okay, having Milky Sap that gives, okay, let me see. Having Milky Sap that gives mouth sore to cattle and displacing grasses and other cattle food, rendering.
The question is the function of having and displacing, are they functionally parallel for you? Are they the same things? Is is having a hand and kicking, are they doing the same thing? One thing is you have it, and the second thing is you're doing an action. Just if you were to really just look at from a functional standpoint, even if you don't go in deep into the meaning piece over there.
So again, coming back to this, I feel that, we when we if we are just focusing on this part over here, you have to understand to not again overburden your brain. I mean, again, the way we previous question had 4 pages of discussion, this question has 6 pages of discussions. And again, there's this things about, what if we remove certain part, would the sentence be correct? Or, again, my question is, when you think about those things, do you, when you're reading articles on New York Times and Economist, do you remove certain parts of the sentence? It's still the same thing, right? Or, question about Milky Sap. Milky Sap is the one. So somebody has said that in choice A, it seems that Milky Sap is the one that gives mouth sores, but in choice B, meaning changes, and now the plant that causes mouth sores. Again, the source of this question is really that the student has not truly understood the visualized meaning, right? The student has not visualized the meaning, and those are things that we need to be absolutely cautious about. That we should not be, just at the surface of the sentence. We need to pause and we need to understand the meaning by pausing and assimilating at appropriate points. So over to you, Rajat, now.
I have two excellent questions here, and I want to thank those guys for asking those questions. The first question is by Nana. Nana. I don't know if you are a he or a she, but the question is, are we able to copy the question and split them on screen while during the exam? How many of you are just concerned saying this, like this, the analysis is just too much, and I don't think I'll be able to do this analysis, and I can't foresee myself doing this analysis on the test. I'm sure the more people than just Nana who have this concern. And Nana, my answer to this is, again, remember, you're building skills. When you're building skills, you have to do things explicitly. I play squash, and I'm learning to play squash. And when I'm learning a new shot, I have to move every muscle in my body to a certain as per a certain plan. My feet have to be in the right place. My body has to be slouched the right way. My arms have to come the right way. My elbow, the angle of my elbow has to be correct. I have to take care of about 20 different things while doing this. And when I do this, when I hit the same shot 1,000 times, um, I don't have to worry about those 20 things. Think about when you're driving, you have to take care of just so many things. If you were to make a list of those things that you have to do. While doing sentence structure, you have to take out 3 to 4 fragments. And yes, while doing this, for the first 30, 40 sentences, you will have to do them explicitly. However, the moment you start doing it explicitly, you get to that 31st 32nd, you're going to find you don't need to do it explicitly. Your brain automatically builds that in your mind. You don't have to write it down on a piece of paper. And that's where it starts to become an implicit part of it. Another way I would really say is we wouldn't be delivering 3 out of 5 700 plus scores on GMAT Club if if this were something that people weren't able to do in the required time. So yes, your concern's right. Um, just go through the learning process, and you're going to find 30 40 sentences down the line This is something that you won't need to do it. Timing will fall in place, and you're going to see that in as how that's going to happen and at which stage that would happen in another 10 minutes or so. Okay, so that's Nana. Hopefully that answers your question. The second question is by Naman. And Naman says, if I read the option B and I'm certain it is correct, do I have to read and eliminate other answer choices or just move ahead and save time? Uh, Great question again. And so there's a best practice and then there is a confidence piece over here. And so the best practice is if you're doing things right, then then I would, if you're very confident, definitely mark it. I would still look at the other options just to reject them with that confidence, with the level of confidence. Why? Because if I'm doing this, frankly, if I'm doing this right, I shouldn't have timing issues on the test. And um, so that's something which I would just say. I mean, the GMAT's not a test of speed. A lot of people think it is. It's not. It's a test of ability. If you build your ability the right way, you will not fall short on timing. And if you are uh, a member of our YouTube channel, you will see, when we post two success stories every week. We have upwards of 260 success stories posted on our YouTube channel, and you'll see those people talk about the moment they start using the right processes, timing is no longer an issue. Now, if you are falling short on time, then yes, you could do this, but my first advice is don't fall short on time. Pal, you wanted to say something to this one?
Yes. So I always say this thing that once you identify that, okay, let's say choice B is the correct answer, spend those extra 20 seconds just identifying at least one thing that's wrong with all the other answer choices. One thing that's deterministically wrong, because then that adds to the confidence level that you have. Now, that is when you're taking the test or when you're taking a cementing quiz or the actual test. But when you are in your review session, at that time, spend all the time to figure out what everything that's wrong with each and every answer choice. So you need to have a very different perspective when you're taking the test, when you're solving the question in a test environment versus when you are in the review mode. Okay.
All right. Sorry, guys, I got disconnected. Pile, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, can you get advice to those people who comprehend and visualize the meaning perfectly but get stuck when it comes to grammar? We'll focus on that now and just hold on to that question. That's a great question also. So just start with, let's kind of go back to where we started with. Our objective with this session was to want to make sure that you answer questions with high accuracy. And accuracy first, we always say that. Why? Because if you don't have that accuracy, you're not going to be able to answer questions. You're not going to be able to score high. Let's kind of put the timing on a back burner over there. Okay, and then the next piece was to make sure that we answer questions quickly. And one of the things that I want to make sure you understand this is, once you get a certain set of core skills, high accuracy and speed happen simultaneously. Okay. Um, the other thing that I want to talk about is when you look at this question, this is the most challenging question out there. If you go on GMAT Lab, they'll call that 85% difficult, which means of all the questions out there, this is where it ranks. And by the way, this is a very old question. So that 85% is a conservative number out there. And the reason why I say that is because it's old question means people have seen this in the other official guides also. So people who attempt this and have already done this also. So the accuracy that you see on GMAT Lab reduced 15% from the correct answer distributed towards the incorrect answer choices. That's the real accuracy. However, if you visualize meaning and if you visualize the answer choices, you'd be able to answer this question confidently. You'd be able and you'd be very confident of the answer choice that you select. Okay, but to visualize meaning, you have to read the sentence uh, in fragments and you have to link various aspects to the central meaning of it. Okay. Um, Visualize answer choices. The other thing which is really important in this sentence, which makes this or this question, which makes this difficult, is because you have to visualize answer choices out there. But again, the core process that you use to visualize remains the same. It's just that in this sentence, you require that additional diligence to visualize answer choices. So the takeaway that I have for you is if you build your visualization muscle, yeah, you will improve. And how do you improve your visualization muscle and how do you build your visualization muscle? As you work through the e-GMAT course, focus on doing that. You focus on doing that, that muscle improves. If you don't focus on doing that, then yes, you'll simply go through the course. That muscle will not improve beyond a point. You will improve, but not to that 90th percentile. Now, I talked about timing and accuracy improving simultaneously. We track this. This is why we know this. What you see over here is this guy, and this is just in the context of one aspect, but we track this for the entire sentence correction. We track it for all major blocks within sentence correction. This guy moved from 58% accuracy to 84% accuracy. These are hard questions that we're talking about. That's a sign of 90th percentile ability. And simultaneously, his time to answer questions came down from 2 minutes per question to a minute 24 per question. And this is tough, that happens simultaneously. And this is what happens when you inculcate good habits, or what we call as winning behaviors. Another thing that I want to talk about is, this is when it comes to analytics, we don't simply track analytics across, because aggregate analytics, they tell you one story, but that's only a partial story. Here, um, you can see in the context of modifiers, this is last 30 plus attempts, this is what it was. In the 16 to 30 attempts, this is what is accuracy. Then you can see how here it has improved. Similarly, the timing is essentially segmented by groups of attempts overall. And this tells you how much you've improved. Why? Because if you look at his aggregate, that aggregate would still be around that 70%. But that's not who he is today. Who he is today is this guy, 90th percentile with the time to answer questions in modifiers at about a minute 24. And that's the value of analytics, which are in context to who you are today. Okay, here's a guy who really struggled to go beyond a 700, and this is what he said when he got to a 750. He actually came to us. When he had a 670 score or so. And he said, while solving questions after going through the course, I was able to identify not one, but two or three errors in 700 level questions. This is the guy who took the GMAT 3 times before he joined the course. Why was he not able to identify those errors? Because he was not visualizing, and he was not doing the sentence structure. The moment you start doing sentence structures, not just in the original sentence, but also in answer choices, you get to that level of clarity. Okay, so then what's that journey to that 90th percentile ability? Okay, again, I'm going to repeat these two things. This is what you need: accuracy first, and timing. Once you get to that high accuracy, will happen simultaneously. So what will this journey look like? What are these winning behaviors of people who achieve that 90th percentile ability? Let's just look at this. Okay, so the three skills that you need to build are, the skill of visualization. We talked a lot about it. We talked about how sentence structure helps you answer questions that are uber difficult. But another thing that you do need to build is you need to have solid grammar. You need to know the various roles that a verb ing modifiers takes. You need to know, you know, what are functionally parallel lists, and scenarios in which, grammatically lists that are still correct but may not be grammatically parallel, or so, or structurally parallel in these cases. So how do you do this? The first thing that we always ask you to do is go through the a master comprehension course. This is where your foundation of visualization. This is where you start learning visualization, and that's something which is very important. Now, there are aspects of master comprehension course which have a specific purpose here. Okay, when you go through module 3, which is building blocks of a sentence, uh, make sure that you focus on learning visualization. You apply this in your everyday usage. Don't worry about timing here. That's something which is not important. Um, in short, what we're asking you to do is be deliberate in becoming adept at using the tools that we provide to you, and you become adept when you apply it every day. And if you do that, 5 days is all I ask you to consciously try, and once you do that, you will no longer need to do that. Okay, then go into another module which is there in this particular course, which is understand meaning. Now remember, you've not learned a single piece of grammar before this, but we focus on making sure you know how to understand meaning. Okay, that's really important. So along with pause points, we have a module on pause points as well. This module um, gives you a jump start to understanding meaning. Again, our goal really is to help you build good habits and push you towards building these good habits. And you'll see more and more of this later. Um, One of the other things I want to make sure I emphasize on this is that we use technology to give you feedback that's personalized. So whenever you see a certain score over here, 100% is excellent, 90% is very good. But if you get below 80%, make sure you make use of that feedback. We built an entire neural engine in our AI, which we call as expert, that gives you feedback. Leverage that, and I'm going to really show you a lot of things that expert AI does. That with the name of inculcating good habits in you. Okay. Then we go into the core sentence correction course, and that's really important for you to understand the role that this course plays. Um, so this course has about 70 concept learning activities. It has 33 application learning activities. So pretty much it teaches you all the grammar that you need. Now remember this, you come to this course with a foundation in visualization and meaning, and your goal is to continue to build on that foundation. This course gives you everything that you need to know when it comes to grammar. It's way more exhaustive than any other book out there, any other course out there. Just to tell you how exhaustive this is, there are about 400 examples and assessments in this course. Okay. Um, During this entire process, this course is about 40 hours. For a novice, it's going to take about 40 hours for you to do this. The goal over here is to amplify your visualization, your sentence structure skills, and to excel at anything in grammar that's out there. Someone asked the question, what if someone's faltering because of grammar? If you have if the 70 concept learning activities which teach grammar, if you have great scores there, you will not falter because of grammar. You're faltering most likely because of visualization and sentence structure. If you're faltering because of grammar, go look at your scores over here, go revise those files. Really important. Okay. Um, while going through the course, make sure you go through certain winning behaviors. Again, we talked about the personalized feedback, get 100% or higher. If you don't get 100%, for example, in this case, this is a portion of the verbs module, um, make sure you revise right away. And we tell you, we track what you do. Here's an example of the same, you see verb sequencing practice quiz or verb tense practice quiz over here. We have the screenshot of what happens when you open that quiz. This guy got 67%, but again, you can see a winning behavior. Even though you may get a score which is lower than 80%, if you revise right away, um, you actually reinforce the skills that you missed out on, and then you're much more confident moving forward. And as you reinforce those skills in real time, what you're going to find is is that in the next activities you don't score low. And that's very important because that clearly shows that you are on the right path. And then there's a reason why we built all of these things there, where we are tracking when is it that you're revising, how much time you're spending revising, because we can really then inculcate good habits. And if you're not doing these activities, we can tell you, please go ahead and do this, because acing the GMAT is a lot about inculcating these good habits, studying consistently. Okay. Um, Another thing, when you're analyzing questions, and these are the question level stats that you see with every question on the platform, we tell you how much time you've taken, how much time you've taken and how much time has the group taken. Now, this is a difficult question. Only 20% of the people got this question right. 55% you chose the answer choice, or this particular student chose the answer choice, which is the most popular answer choice here that you can see. You can see those stats here. Clearly the student took longer, and so you've got to really see what confused the student, and at which step did the student miss on this question, so that you can rectify that right then and there. And that's the value of revising this right away. That's the value of providing you these stats, so that you can really say, hey, people who get it right quickly, which means clearly I'm not doing the required amount of processing at one particular step, or clearly I have a conceptual issue. Let's kind of identify that issue, fix that right away, so that the same thing doesn't come and haunt me later on. Does that make sense? When you're doing this, can you see how these habits can help you get better much more quickly? Okay. Another piece that's really important is, expert AI. One of the other things that it does is it also curates a review list for you. So this is, a review list. You can see that from the top left-hand corner, and that review list not only includes questions that you answered correctly, incorrectly, but also includes questions that you answered correctly. So one of the other things that you really see is when you review something, we track on a per question level how much time you took. So here this guy took about 45 seconds reviewing this, 2 minutes. But here's another question that this guy spent 3 minutes on. He got it right, but that's a lot of time. And the person did not review that question. So don't just review questions that you answered incorrectly, but also review questions that you answered correctly, but took longer. Why? Because again, you missed on something initially. You did back and forth. You may have gotten to the correct answer through process of elimination, but we want to fix that, and which is why we create those review lists, which is why we tell you to revise them. Okay. Um, Once you get through the SC course, one of the most important steps is cementing. And what leads to cementing, or what helps you cement properly, is building an error log. So we have an entire module around cementing. You can see it's about an hour and a half of content here. There's a lot of stuff where we talk about how do you build an error log. Our error logs are very impactful. They're behavioral error logs. They identify behaviors that make you make mistakes. Go through this file at least twice, not just once, at least twice. This will help you, it'll propel you from that 60th percentile to that 90th percentile ability. Okay, so what's the job of the SC course? To make sure that you build that visualization muscle through sentence structure, to make sure that all the grammar that you need to know, and these are deterministic grammar concepts, and then to make sure that your timing starts to come in place. And really, this is an outcome. You do this, this happens automatically. Okay. Now, you're done with these two. Let's talk about cementing and test readiness. Why? Because this is what takes you from that 60th, 70th percentile to that 90th percentile ability. Okay. So what do you need to do? You need to excel in cementing. Cementing is a very specific process. We have cementing quizzes that you have to take. You do SC, you take an SC cementing quiz. You do CR, you take a CR cementing quiz. And overall, we give you 20 odd cementing quizzes in Scholarium. So Scholarium has its own dedicated question bank. You don't use that bank while practicing in the SC course or so. Okay. So at this point, excel in cementing, identify if you have any specific weakness. Once you identify those weaknesses, then fix that weakness. We have a very dedicated strategy team that helps you define personalized study plan or personal improvement plans, and then we have a tracking mechanism in Scholarium that helps you track that improvement. Okay, so what tools do we provide? The error log that started from the previous course, the SC course, cementing quizzes, the revision list, they continue to come in over here. You have an improvement tracker, and there's another chart which we call a consistency tracker that comes in, and that comes in really, really handy. So let's kind of look at this. This is your attempt in cementing quizzes. This is just in the context of SC. Okay. There will be cementing quizzes like this where you score below the threshold. You can really see a threshold is clearly defined for you. You know what to aim for to fix cementing. Okay. It's okay to score low in one or more of cementing quizzes, as long as you've done the course well, as long as you fill your error log, you'll be able to see those high scores, the scores above threshold. I can tell you 70% or 75% of people excel in cementing. People who do well in stage one, who put in winning behaviors, 90+% of them do well in cementing. So it's about your behaviors that determine how well you're going to do this. And this is where persistence and a habit to revise, this is where you see those best practices come in. So it's not just the tools, it's not just the course, it is those practices. It is your character that's important here. Okay. This is an example of, with every quiz result, what do you see over here? You can see in every cementing quiz you figure out, has timing been a factor? Did you get lucky with certain questions? Did you rush through certain questions, which means you didn't spend enough time on those questions, as much time as you should have? And again, why are we able to do this? Because we have, for each question, we have data of tens of thousands of students, and we know which of those students went on to score 700, 740, 750, and we can really tell you, based, well, when compared to their behaviors as an aggregate, how are your behaviors? And that's what comes out over here. Here's a review list, and what you see is not just incorrect questions, but also correct questions. What you see is also why you have to review. Did you spend enough time? Here you can see this guy spent excessive time over here, spent 2 minutes and 7 seconds, whereas the recommended time is just about 57 seconds or so. And then what you also see is the kind of review that the person has to do. This here is a took longer review, and you have inputs on how should you look at questions that where you took longer versus how should you look at questions that you answered incorrectly. This is an output of a mixed quiz, which is why you see questions from comparisons, modifiers, miscellaneous, etc. in this case. Again, what technology at e-GMAT does is it tells you what you need to do, so that what you focus on doing is acting upon those recommendations, and you're not shooting in the dark. And we want to make sure that you do that. In addition to this technology, we have a very dedicated support team. Many of them have 700 plus scores. They also, if you have a question, you write to them and they will get back to you with very similar recommendations. Now, I talked about another tool with regards to isolating specific weakness. Within SC, we can figure out what is your relative weakness at as a certain block level. Here, clearly, this is a block where this person needs to improve. And once you identify that specific weakness, you can then again track that improvement over groups of questions, and track that improvement not just in accuracy, as you can see, but also in timing. Again, close that loop, and you're going to find improving to that 90th percentile is not a shot in the dark. Now, this may seem many steps, and yes, they are, because a 730 plus score is the reason why only 4% of people get there. Okay, and 60% of those 4% of people actually come from e-GMAT. Why? Because they go through these steps. They may seem like a lot of steps, but if you do them right, they don't take very long. It take a lot less, they consume a lot less time than what you currently do. Why? Because each step has a defined input, a defined output, a defined end time, and defined metric, which signals that you've done that well. Okay, and which is what leads to such success. A lot of people talk about 5-star reviews. It also leads to the most 5-star reviews out there. Okay, with that, check out the free trial. You've experienced the visualization part of it. Experience now with the free trial, you can experience the concept learning part of it as well. And in this case, you can take a diagnostic if you want to figure out which of these concepts you need to learn, so that you focus just on learning those concepts. Also, if critical reasoning is an area where you need help, check out the CR free trial as well. Okay, with that, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure having you here. I understand that it's Saturday for you, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, and it's good to have dedicated people who are willing to put in the effort to excel on the GMAT. Any questions or feedback on the webinar? Questions or feedback? I believe I've answered this question. Perfect. Sounds great. All right. I have a couple of questions here. How long does it take for someone to go from a V32 to a V40? typically, depends on what's the difference between a V32 and a V40. So let's say you're really good in let's say reading comprehension, but need help in sentence correction and critical reasoning. So we identify that you're really good in reading comprehension. We have a Sigma X mark that does that, and that way you just go through the SCNCR courses. So you're looking about a 90-hour effort over there, or so. So to go from V32 to V40. If on the other hand you are at a 60th percentile in every subsection, then you're looking at a bit more effort. Why? Because you have to touch every subsection. You've got to perfect every subsection. So there you're looking at about 110 to 115 hours or so. But either way, if you write to us, if you or there's an option to ask for a study plan right from the free trial. You can essentially we can give you an estimate even before you start. We can give you a sequence of learning even before you start as well. Okay. Some of the success stories that we talked about on YouTube, you guys can access those here if you need to, and you can download the session presentation on the top left hand corner. So okay. 400 to 740, is that possible? Yes, 400 to 740 is possible if you ask me that question. But it is, I won't call it's difficult. It's the likelihood of getting there is not as high as going from a 600 to a 740, and for the very simple reason that people lose patience. It's not that people who are at a 400 cannot get there. The thing which is there is someone who's at a 600 has quant taken care of, or verbal, certain portions of verbal taken care of, or certain portions of quant, and they have to focus on, let's say, 6 out of the 15 possible things. Those 6 things that they have to focus on, they have to go from a low ability to a high ability. Someone who's at a 400 probably has to take care of 15 things. Now, if you have the persistence to follow the same process in each of those 15 things and hit that 90th, 80th percentile ability or so, absolutely you can get there. Often what we find is people lose patience. So if you think you have the patience, absolutely, this will give you a trackable way to get there. But you need to have patience in there. And again, even as you see this set of success stories here, um, you see Karthik, who went from a 570 to a 740. This guy's studying at Tuck right now. This is an example, of someone who's improved by about 170 points. Similarly, if you go to a YouTube channel, you'll see people who've gone from a 400 to a 730 or so. Again, you find that one common theme between such, when you look at 170, 180, 200, 220 point improvement, is those people are persistent. They are very determined. You have that determination, you have that persistence, you have that diligence to study consistently. We give you the tools to get there. Okay. And that's kind of a common theme that you're going to find during the session or so. Okay. With that, I want to thank you guys for your time today, and go check out the free trial. Come to a algebra session tomorrow, and see how, not only on the verbal side, but over the last year or so, we've actually delivered more quant success than any other prep company. All right. Thank you, and have a great day.